Hi, I'm Janelle, and you're listening to The Moment It Clicked. Join me as I dive into the minds of fellow multilinguals to uncover the myth of the click. Is it real? Do others experience it too? Let's find out. Today I'm here with Carl, an English coach who runs courses that specialise in helping neurodiverse professionals speak and write English confidently. You can find out more about his work at Platform 10 English. That's at Platform 10 English on Instagram. So, welcome, Carl.
I like that snazzy intro. Thank you for having me.
An absolute pleasure, an absolute pleasure. You are the first male voice to appear on this podcast. How does that make you feel?
I was conscious of that, actually. I was thinking I'm pioneering in some way, so I can bring much masculinity and testosterone to this, but yeah, I'll do my best.
I'm really curious to find out how people feel when they're learning another language, or when they've reached a certain level where they can, confidently say, I speak this language. And in your case, you have gone through that process with Spanish and also French, but I don't think to the same level, or to the same level.
So actually, French was the root of the spark of my linguistical interests. And at university is what I studied as well. I spent my year abroad there. So actually, really, that was the beginning of the journey. But yeah, Spanish has been a part of my life more recently. My wife's Spanish. I've been living here only for the last year, but coming to this region of Spain for the last 15 years or so. And yeah, really, that's been kind of a big, it's part of my day-to-day life. My kids are now kind of learning Spanish as they grow up, coming up bilingual, which is really interesting for me, of course, and seeing how they effortlessly breeze through all of this, whereas I had to work quite a lot to get to this stage. So yeah, my French was definitely there, and it always will be. I hope that Spanish is something I can't avoid, which is a great thing. Being immersed in the language, of course, is the best way to really push forward and kind of yeah, not have the choice is essentially is the way we are supposed to learn languages and how my children are learning. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. But French was definitely there at the beginning, sure.
So, with all of that in mind, do you think it's possible to be the same person in two or more languages? Do you feel like yourself when you speak French, when you speak Spanish?
In my case, I I do feel a version of myself. I really kind of became kind of a level of fluency was my early adulthood when I was living there. That was really the time I started feeling like I could express myself properly. And then, yeah, you're a version of yourself. And recently, as we mentioned neurodiversity and having been diagnosed with ADHD in the last year or so, discovering a lot more about why you know, potentially why I've learned languages well. And there's a part of this people pleasing factor, I suppose, or not wanting to disappoint and trying to integrate yourself, which is, said to be a part of it. I definitely think that's contributed to me is kind of trying to integrate myself as much as possible when I was in France. And in turn, yes, I suppose I've been able to express myself and be myself a little bit more in French. And and now I'm reflecting on that. Is that really the case? Or am I just imitating other people? It is myself in some ways, but it's also a combination of lots of other people that I've met on the way. So I don't know if that is that me now, and is that just being growing up and being an adult, a young adult, you are discovering yourself and you take snippets from other people. Who am I? Is this really me, or am I constantly evolving as a person? So being aware of my personality is actually something I've always found difficult. I don't know why that is, but I do know that in certain situations I can kind of express myself in better than others. But yeah, in French and Spanish more so right now, it's kind of in second nature in one way because there's certain situations I'm really confident, talking about myself, and others I'm stumped in. So I suddenly have to not focus on what I am I'm focusing more on the way I'm saying something or the words I'm saying than I am on anything else. So I don't think that's a version of myself that is true to who I really am. My answer is quite multi-layered there, but it's definitely something I've thought about. Okay, what is me? Am I allowed to be different versions of me?
It's really, really interesting. You did touch on lots of different aspects of what kind of forms personality, I think. And I'm no expert. I can only talk about it from my own lived experiences as well. As you were speaking, I had a flashback to a moment when it took me back to my sort of three best friends in primary school or after returning. So I grew up in Singapore for 5 years and Japan before that when I was even younger. But I came back and I met this great group of girls in the last couple of years of primary school. And a shout out to them if they're listening. They know who they are. And I remember thinking that I was like I was analyzing sort of all of their personalities, like the quirky artistic, the straight and narrow, the sort of in between, and how each of those girls reflected a part of me, reflected a part of who I am as a person, and that's why we were friends. Because I said, yes, I have that quirky side, I have that straight and narrow side, I have the in between, and what an amazing sort of gift to see yourself reflected back by those people. And so with that little anecdote, taking that to language, I mean, and taking that to any sort of, we are, I think, we are aspects of all of the people that we meet along the way, and the people that we are, who I am today, is completely, um, you know, constructed by the languages that I speak. So I think it's really true that that we do, construct ourselves throughout life. And so it is, of course, a great question to say, to sit back and say, well, who am I?
No, I completely agree with that. It's just, I think we are a bit, our brains are very plastic, and I've learned a lot about that recently, and adapting to different situations and taking bits and bobs we say from our own experiences, and that becomes a part of us. But yeah, are there several versions of myself? Perhaps there are. Does that become less me? No, I think that's a part of me. So that's the language is a big part of that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so, can you pinpoint a moment when you felt the two, three versions of yourself merging into one, like this moment of a click?
Going back to my former experience in France when I was living there, um, I was in an environment where I was surrounded in French speaking people. I was working in a bar. It wasn't kind of like it was my least formal but most effective education in this Erasmus year. I think it's what I got the most out of, just being surrounded, immersed in language on a pretty much day to day basis. And there were you start off by stealing language and just reproducing it, and you kind of that gets you by, and then you get to a point where you can start creating your own. You manipulate language in your own way. I'd already studied French for quite a while formally, but never been confident enough to express myself in a certain way. And then there was a moment there, maybe a big spike, big click, maybe you could call it, where I could actually, yeah, I felt like I was just a little more of ease. I was a lot of time I was run down, you're doing late shifts, you're milking back coffee, espressos until late, or other things at late hours, early hours in the morning. And you're and being able to kind of get by in that sort of situation kind of made me feel a bit, okay, yeah, I can do this, and yeah, I think I'm there now. But it wasn't necessarily a moment, but it was definitely in that period I felt like, okay, that this is it can kind of be me, yeah, or a version of me, like we've mentioned. And I feel like what part of the gang, that's a big part of it, isn't it? Just feel like I'm not the guy that you have to kind of slow down for. Can we just explain this to Carl in a different way? No, you just one of us, and I just went with that flow. So that felt really good. That felt really good. I was just want to, we say it in Spanish like one more, like one more, and not like another person amongst that group.
Yeah.
So yeah, I felt that that's maybe the period in my French. Yeah, and then going to Spanish, I suppose it's maybe so we were living in Brazil with Spanish people, and I felt actually at home. There was a point I became okay. This, when you kind of you live in a different country, you have to adapt to different language. Quite mentally draining. That was Portuguese at that time,
Yeah.
and I came home, and actually Spanish was almost like a comfort zone again. When you kind of go, oh, you can finally speak to your mates in your mother tongue, and So, or sometimes you pick up the phone and speak to someone, but actually Spanish kind of became that language for me a little while. So I could kind of put my guard down a little bit. Maybe that's a click in itself as well. Um,
Amazing.
but yeah, maybe that was my moment. Just yeah, I'm just thinking about that right now, whether that was probably the moment I felt that I could relax, put my guard down. That's
Wow.
a click in itself. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting the words that people use to describe this sort of idea, and putting your guard down as being one of those. I'm starting to see over the episodes a little bit of a repetition of this idea that there is actually a little bit um, of our own decision making involved in that. So
Yeah, definitely. I think yeah, when you're clicking, maybe in a way is realizing that it's okay just to communicate, and you're going to make mistakes. I'm still in all of my languages, English included. I'll make mistakes, and it's just about being a little bit more chilled about it and just saying, you know what, you guys get me. It's maybe not exactly the way I want to say it, and but I'm communicating. They understand where I'm getting at, right? And that's sometimes that's the place you get to and just say, no, I don't need it to be perfect. And then obviously adding to your languages, you maybe in your Italian journey, you might realize that kind of has a knock-on effect on that. So actually, I just need to get by. I don't need to, someone learning a language for the first time might be over obsessed with little details. I have some students of my own, and just getting them over that journey, saying, you know what, your purpose of you learning language is to be able to speak and communicate. Communication isn't perfection. It's definitely about, sometimes being okay with it, that you mess up, all right, and you
exactly.
can start again, and you can correct yourself like we do in our mother tongue. Sometimes we forget that.
I don't know. You sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, becoming a part of like this sort of club, and I wanted to ask you how you feel when you speak another language. And
Like I said, mentioned earlier, I do feel like I was remember when I tried to start learning Spanish, because I've used the example of French before. I was learning, kind of doing some night classes, and didn't really get much progress out of it. But I knew I was going to be traveling in South America in a couple of months' time, so I thought I need to find some ways to progress. And I wasn't in the club yet, by the way, but I saw the club, and this is the actual situation was I got stuck outside a Pearl Jam concert. It was in Hyde Park in London, which was a great place to be. I had some friends who were on the inside, um, but I wasn't ready to go inside. I had a few beers with me. I'm allowed to say on this podcast, I had some beers with me, and I wasn't allowed to bring them inside to the concert arena, the area where it was cornered off. I didn't realize my friends were inside. I saw lots of people around. I thought, okay, I'll just sit here with my beers and drink a few here. And then I saw a group of kind of Spanish people, the club, in kind of a circle, sitting down. Like they looked like a friendly bunch. I need to kind of practice my Spanish a little bit. And I tell you what, this is probably one of those pivotal moments in my life because it actually led to me meeting my wife. But I went over to them and I said to them, hi guys, you're like a friendly bunch. Do you want some beers? I'm not going to be able to drink all of these for my friends and I, but I'm not to bring in. I said, yeah. And they kind of, yeah, come on, join us. And sat down and really open to kind of let me join them. I didn't speak much Spanish, but I kind of like felt the confidence to use a couple of expressions, and then I suppose my journey from there on was kind of like be part of this club because I wasn't understanding everything, but I was kind of the guy on the side just trying to be, you know, can I be your friend, guys? But friend in terms of like, can I tap into this world of yours? And the more you discovered about it, like the humor, the language, the music, and everything that it opens you up to. If I just had my own language, I wouldn't know what I was missing out. There might be a world out there that's got loads of cool things happening. I have no idea. It's like, yeah, they're probably just doing the same thing as us in a different language, right? It's not that at all. It's tapping into a whole new world. So more than a club, that you wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So yeah, being part of that and just listening. Sometimes I'm listening to like I said, my wife, she doesn't speak French. I've got this album. It's like made for kids. It's hilarious. The music. I was like, it's worth learning French just to understand this album. because there's no way I can explain to you like the humor and the language. I can translate everything, but I can't explain to how funny and all the cultural references come into it. It's worth learning French just to listen to it. So I recommend anyone. It's called the artist called Oldelaf, and he's got it's called Bête et Méchant, I think it's called. Made for kids. I tried to, my kids now love it because I force it upon them. And he speaks a bit of French too. I spoke
You
to him in
will
French.
find this funny.
Yeah, yeah. You will, exactly. You will appreciate this because the wife isn't quite there yet. But it is a part like I listen to maybe like I watch a stand-up and I'm in Spanish and I think I can't explain this to anybody. This is the only people that understand not just the language and the cultural layers that come with it can really appreciate it. So like it's uh it's really special. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember what the question where the question started, but how do you feel? Was it how do you feel when you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a part of a cool club or a different universe. That if I had not learned the language, I wouldn't even know existed.
Yeah.
That's the big part of it. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very deep. All of this, like,
Mm.
yeah, we can go quite deep. We're now going to turn to creativity, another deep topic. And I wanted to ask you how you would define creativity. What does it mean for you to be creative?
I suppose being creative is it's kind of like the different ways we might get to the same place, or the outcome might be different. But I think it's the different ways we might approach reaching an outcome. I mean, it might be artistically, might be with languages. I think creativity in languages might go back to what I referred to before, in the sense that you'll get to the destination. It's about there's lots of routes to get there, and sometimes that creative element is using synonyms, words, finding different ways, maybe not even knowing. I remember in Portuguese, I couldn't use the past tense. I had to be very creative as to how I would communicate without using past tense in what I was doing. So I suppose that's being more kind of going back to the language area, but I definitely think it's that kind of your choice of route to take a journey, kind of to get to that destination, and those outcomes might be different. But yeah, I think everyone's got that little something. No one brain is the same. No one person is the same. So I think everybody's got their own way of kind of perceiving things, and then also their in terms of the way they produce as well.
Yeah.
That's what came to mind.
Yeah. Um, the different ways in which we reach a destination.
Mhm.
I think it's quite clear your answer. Whether on a different day you would give a different answer. I mean, it's highly likely.
In 10 minutes, you ask me the same thing, I'll find a different way and maybe come out with a different answer. But yeah, that's creativity in itself, right? So
Yeah. Okay, you touched on this because you said I'm sort of drifting back into the topic of language, and the question was going to be like, does speaking two or more languages make you more creative?
we tend to be more creative, I think, and because we've had to adapt these situations, we've been forced through those phases where we've had to kind of shape our journey different ways and hasn't always been easy. So it kind of forces you to kind of choose different little pockets from your brain. So I think we're more able to be flexible in our thinking as a result of going through language learning processes, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm curious to ask you about which of your languages you think is more creative.
This without any bias,
Yeah, I,
it's going
I,
to be
I don't
very
think we can
typical.
be, we can't be unbiased, can we?
I suppose otherwise you just ask ChatGPT, right? If there was no you wanted to ask real people for a reason. Okay. Um, in an ideal world, the hybrid of two languages would be my best creative place as
Hmm.
a language in itself. Yeah, my mother tongue pips it for sure.
If you were a project creator, somebody who's starting a business, who is already running that business in a first language that is not English, what do you think would motivate that person to transform the business into English?
I don't think people need much convincing of the value of English in means to communicate in kind of business and commerce and all those things. So that in itself should be kind of intrinsic almost in a sense in terms of your motivation to build that as a part of your model. Um, but I would really encourage people, and I would say this comes from like where I come from in terms of my language teaching. So I really think it's important for you to want to do something. And I know that sounds obvious, but in terms of delivering something in English and or if it's speaking casually or networking with clients, I think you've really got to want it and you've got to feel it yourself. I don't think it's anything you can be told. It's got to be from within.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming and joining us and adding your piece of this journey to the sort of puzzle because it's sort of expanding and expanding, and I'm really, really loving what I'm finding. So I really appreciate your contribution.
Thanks a lot for all your hard work and yeah, your questions are really intriguing, really thought provoking. So yeah, thanks for it's made me think about a lot of things myself. So yeah, thanks to you.
Awesome. Well, in this bundle of thanks, we can say our farewells, and yeah, we will see the final version in a couple of weeks' time.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
I'm Janelle, and you've been listening to The Moment It Clicked. It's been a pleasure having you with us. If this episode inspired you, please subscribe, rate it, and leave a review. You can catch the latest episodes, bonus content, and apply to be a guest on the show at www.english-creative.com/podcast. There are so many door-opening opportunities when you are able to talk about your project in English. The question is, are you ready? Head over to www.english-creative.com for your free I'm Ready roadmap, your first step to transforming your project into English. I can't wait to connect with you there. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and let your creativity shine in every language.